Okay, my topic is concerned with teamwork across the disciplines, and also maybe if we talk about ethical issues, the idea how we can finance students doing research in a group of scholars and postgraduate studies. We have been doing for a long time life writing at the university in Mainz, and all of a sudden 3 years ago we had a sponsor, a pharmaceutical company called Boehringer Ingelheim, which gave 100 million euros in order to establish an institute for molecular science, molecular biology, or life sciences. The state then contributed 40 million euros in order to build a huge building, and every time I drove on campus I thought, gee, this is where the money is, you know, and thought about a combination of life sciences and life writing, and we eventually managed to make an application to the German Research Foundation in order to get what is called a research training group, which potentially funds a group of doctoral colleges over a 9-year period, which allows 3 cohorts of 12 graduate students to gain a PhD or an MD degree. That was the point, and the name of this project is called Life Sciences, Life Writing, Experiences at the Boundaries of Human Life Between Biomedical Explanation and Lived Experience. Each of the candidates who is funded for a 3-year period with a monthly stipend of 1,200 or 1,500 euros, depending on the marital status. There's also funding for a coordinator and a postdoc. There are 12 colleagues who are the principal investigators and direct the dissertations, usually in a combination of life writing and life science expertise. Then we have additional expertise which comes from a group of 19 national and international associate members who are affiliated and are invited for lectures or short-term visits. And we also cooperate with autobiography centers such as the one here and on a global scale. The format of the research training group requires an offer of a number of courses in which the foundations of the research are discussed, but the major part is the writing of the thesis, hopefully in 3 years. The first cohort of 12 students from Germany, Canada, and China started last year in April, and we hope that they will finish 2 years from now. And potentially this whole program is about 2 million euros over this 9-year period. Now I'm going to talk about the way in which we set up the program as a cross-disciplinary research in life science and life writing, and I will then present 3 projects that students are working on in medical studies, pharmaceutical studies, and life writing, using the descriptions which the students presented. Now the program is the research and training program of the Graduate College aims at establishing mutually shared methodological pathways to topics in life sciences and life writing related to boundary experiences of human life. The Graduate College proceeds from the hypothesis that in their explanations of boundary situations of human life, life sciences and biomedicine on the one hand, and the humanities and cultural sciences on the other hand, approach the same subject of humans in their life world from different angles. In this sense, life sciences and life writing can each be understood as a specific set of narrative practices in which the significance of explanations and models depend to a large degree on the ways in which empirical data, explanation, and experiences are narrativized. From the 20th century to the 21st century, the conditions of human life have changed dramatically due to political, socio-economic, ecological, and cultural influences. Simultaneously, the interpretive models and spaces of action in medicine have shifted from observing and influencing biological processes towards the biological and technological shaping of health and disease. Examples are manifold: assisted reproduction, prenatal diagnostics, organ transplantation, longevity, and dying. In all of these boundary experiences, the role of medicine has changed fundamentally and has influenced the ways in which we conceptualize and deal with human life. These developments have also resulted in new approaches to explaining and understanding human life and life narratives in social and cultural studies. Over the past few years, life writing has widened its scope in terms of content and method to include all areas of life, all forms of its presentation in all media. And over the past 2 days, we had a lot of that, and maybe in continuation of the program, we have to add online and media, but that is a different story. The graduate program converges the areas of life sciences and life writing and sees them as a complementary approaches to understand, explain, and act in boundary experiences of human life. To achieve this convergence, joint concepts need to be established. So we focus on 3 research areas: corporality, ability, temporality, which function as 3 conceptual spaces within which biomedical explanations, literary and cultural analyses, and human experiences interact. Corporeality refers to the materiality of the human body, but not only its biological parts, but also the investment of cultural expectations, values, and requirements. The second category of ability looks at the loss or gain of the body and mind received in boundary situations, and the need of the biomedical disciplines for systems of orientation beyond diagnostic tables. And the third category of temporality departs from basic fact of the human being as a temporal being, subject to chronological and biological time. In many boundary situations, such as trauma, post-traumatic situations, or chronic diseases which last for life, the aspect of temporality becomes crucial. Based on the assumption that these 3 categories of corporality, ability, and temporality are intimately related to narrative practices, we postulate for the research program 6 approaches: narrativity and narratability, the conceptualization of narrative practices, the materiality of narration insofar as we also look at objects that tell stories, narrative transformations, narration as an epistemic project, and different aspects of a narrative self. The interdisciplinary approaches are linked by narrative practices which function as a conceptual and methodological background against which boundary situations and experience of human life are studied from diverse disciplinary angles, such as medicine, neonatology, psychotherapy, pharmaceutical biology, molecular biology, social sciences, cultural anthropology, history, philosophy, ethics, transnational cultural studies, and ecology. So I now would like to look at 3 and shortly talk about some of the projects that students have started to work on for their doctoral thesis. The first one is by Miriam Hallstein, who has a project on preterm birth, a qualitative interview-based study about the experiences of parents. There are several projects among the 12 which deal with childbirth and childhood trauma, so that they are interrelated in the group. There's hardly any other medical specialty where the limits of what is considered to be medically possible, but also ethically preferable, is changing as quickly as neonatology. When a child is born preterm in this rapidly fluctuating environment that is so highly medically engineered, many parents describe the situation as a liminal experience because of the intensity and gravity of the situation. As parents, they have custody and therefore they have to make decisions concerning the child's health under major prognostic uncertainties. Most of these decisions touch the border of viability, as formally distinct limits have been constantly stretched and blurred through medical progress. The statistics and data that usually provide some comfort of time of evidence-based medicine do not represent a safe basis of decision-making in neonatology. In clinical studies, the number of medical cases is constitutionally small, and the particular case history is often too individual to be easily and safely classified. Additionally, in most cases, it is hard to properly judge the extent of a child's impairment before the age of 6 or 7. Furthermore, the clinical practice of neonatology could drastically change within a period of 6 or 7 years, so that at the time the research results are published, the guidance they provide is very limited. In this research project, the student will explore the liminal experiences of parents whose preterm born children spent the first weeks of their lives in a neonatal intensive care setting. The parents' narrations in these qualitative interviews will provide extensive and complex insights into their liminal experiences. The interviews will be conducted with parents of children of 3 different age groups, parents of a 1 or 2 year old, parents of a 6 to 7 year old, and parents of a child who was born in the 80s and who is already a young adult, so it stretches out. The analysis of these qualitative interviews will focus on the narratability of the event as well as the epistemic meeting place. It will be explored about what kind of experiences the parents can speak, which are narrable, and about which they cannot narrate. It will be discussed what kind of influencing factors help to narrate an event more easily, and to what extent the context of narrating is shaping the narrability of an event. In order to cope with preterm birth, it might be necessary for the parents to re-narrate this liminal experience with the help of one's personal surroundings and friends until the life story can be told as coherent. The process of co-narration might be impaired if there is no epistemic meeting point. There's actually the director of this pediatric clinic who also gave a report and is one of the principal investigators about children that are not born yet, that might be born after 24 months of pregnancy, and then the decision between the parents, the doctor, and about the child that is still in the womb creates stories that are also subject of analysis. The second project that Laura Schneider writes on is experimental subjects in clinical pharmaceutical research. This is a project about the need for biomedical innovation to find experimental subjects in pharmaceutical research. The process of offshoring clinical trials to Eastern Europe, China, or India, where recruitment of possible research subjects is said to be much more effective than, for example, in the US and some Western European countries, can count as one reaction to this challenge. In the wake of such phenomena, anthropologists and social scientists, mainly situated in the US, Australia, and Great Britain, started to focus their research on the clinical trials industry, inevitably touching the problem of the experimental subject on a theoretically, empirically informed basis. Despite the fact that global varieties of capitalism also clearly have an effect on research in drugs, little is known about the social structure of those who provide their bodily functions for research, about their experiences and their way to make sense of participation. Whilst the academic debate surrounding experimental subjects is often narrowed down to ethical guidelines under the imperative of protection, this PhD project aims to shed light on those marked potentially vulnerable, persons who are willing to face the double liminal experience between being merely human experimental grounds and personal integrity, between experimental medicine and bodily intactness from a social scientific perspective, and lets them speak. The final topic is by Ruth Steinberg, a literature person on dystopian fiction. Her project deals with the representation of bioethical borderline situations in dystopian literature. Dystopian fiction represents an interesting field for life writing since it focuses on the individual in borderline situations and engages with personal reflections of lived experience. The genre draws attention to the ethical dimension of present-day decisions by highlighting their future implications and their effect on the individual in a most extreme form. By focusing on fictitious literature, not only the aspect of what currently is, but also of what could be, will be incorporated in the portrayal of lived experiences. The student employs a cultural ecological analysis which will allow her to perceive dystopia not just as a distorted version of the present, but to emphasize its intricate establishment of counter-discourse and to integrate them into the current interdisciplinary discussion. What can we draw as a conclusion for this project of life science and life writing cooperating with these 12 students, 12 principal investigators, and a team of affiliated members? I think a common basis of our research is the definition of life. Life precedes life writing, quite obviously. When does life begin? When does it end? How does it unroll in time and space? The focus on boundary situation accentuates these questions, and particularly ethical questions. These definitions of aspects and phases of life influence, of course, the writing of a life and its observation in scientific terms, its narrativization or medical explanation. The radical transdisciplinary approach between the humanities, social sciences, and life sciences will provide a multi-perspective for the discussion of both life and writing and will incorporate new data. It will also foster and force people to work as a team collectively across the disciplines. Finally, the research is also meant to lead to a better communication between medical doctors and their patients. The stories or the kind of reports that patients receive from their medical doctors are usually not in such a way that patients understand them, and this is also a project that is connected with this research. These hopes coincide with efforts pursued in the medical humanities, such as here at King's College, or in the narrative medicine program run by Rita Charan and Laura Spiegel at Columbia University. Thank you.